Hey everybody, today I'm going to go over the making a composite tutorial in Photoshop. It seems like there's a lot going on in this particular tutorial and I want to make sure that everybody has what they need to be able to complete it. This is one where we're going to be combining a lot of layers, using layer masks, using blending modes, and all of those kinds of ingredients that make Photoshop what it is. So let's get started. This is the tutorial that I'm on. Combine images in creative ways. I think this is in the week 9 folder. I have downloaded the sample files, and now let's open up this peer photo. I'm going to go through the steps of this tutorial, but I might not make it exactly the way that they do in the Photoshop video. You know, we all have our kind of poetic license that we're allowed to take in these creative projects. So don't feel like you have to literally mimic what they have going on here. Finding images that you like and then mimicking them, trying to rebuild them in Photoshop is a great way to learn how to use these Photoshop tools. And I encourage you to find images and other things that you would like to recreate in Photoshop and just practicing, right? It's just practice, drills and practice, drills and practice. So let's go. So here we are with the peer.jpg file opened. Now I'm going to open up Sunset Sky. And what we're going to do here is copy this image and then paste it into the other one. So I'll choose Command A to select all, Command C to copy it, close this window, and Command V to paste it in. Now I want to be able to see underneath this. You can see that I've added a new layer here on the right, and I'm going to call this one Sunset Sky. I'll choose the Move tool up here in the top left, and I'll reduce the opacity on that sky layer to 50%. This is the way I can see what's happening in my image. I'll hit Return to commit that opacity change. Now I'm going to use the Move tool again, and I'm going to grab this sky and move it up to where the edge, you see the edge along here? I'm going to take this edge and move it just below that horizon on the peer layer. Now that we have the sunset sky layer dragged up a little ways to take over the sky here, I'm going to put a layer mask on it in order to blend these two images. And so I come down here to the bottom and I click this Add Layer Mask tool. Here now, we can see they're not quite blended yet. I'll press the key G to choose the Gradient tool, which is here in the toolbar. And under the Gradient menu and Basics, I'm going to choose Black to White. When we're using masks, it's important to remember black conceals and white reveals. So what we're going to do here is gradually transition the sunset sky layer to be visible. So let's say I want it to be 100% visible at the horizon. I'll make sure that the sunset sky mask is visible. I'll put my cursor on the horizon of the peer image, hold down the Shift key, and drag. Now, because I've made it black to white, the mask started at black, which hides the sunset sky. And you can see that it goes to white down here at the bottom. Here's black at the top, and it gradually transitions to white. This diamond can move that graduated layer, but this isn't what we want. We want the sunset sky to come up. So I'm going to choose Command I to invert the mask and make what's black white and what's white black. Boop. There we go. However, you can see that I've still got this edge here. So my gradation isn't as nice as I would like it. So let's try and draw it again. Maybe you can see that line moving, right? As I flip it around. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm going to come over here and choose the Move key again to turn that off. Sometimes this layer mask can be difficult to kind of imagine what you're looking at. In that case, you can hit the Pipe key or the, what is that, the backward slash underneath the Delete key on the right side of your keyboard. It's a vertical line. And so if we're in Photoshop and then have that mask selected, I can hit that pipe, and this is what's called a quick mask. It'll turn everything red. You can actually reset this color if you like, but red generally works really well. And this is showing me what the mask is covering. So the red part is the black part that's concealing parts of the image below it. And the white part is the visible part that's showing you the image that you're on. So I still have my Move tool selected, top left, and I'll click in the background to turn that selection box off. Our next step is to add another image to our composite here. And this time I'm going to use a different method to to add a new image into this composite. I'm going to use File, Place. I'll come up here to the menu bar and choose File, Place Embedded, and I will choose North. So we can see that this is placed in here very nicely, right in the middle. And I'll click Return so that we can see it here. And over here on the right-hand side, we can see first that the layer has been placed with the name of the file already. So we know what it is. And then we see this little thumbnail here, little icon. This is the Smart Objects thumbnail. What a smart object does is allows us to make and reverse changes to a file within a Photoshop document non-destructively. It's like an extra image added to this image, which we can then still work on independently. And that's why smart objects can be very useful for you, giving you another non-destructive method of adding layers to your Photoshop documents. To make this north-facing arrow blend better with the layers below and make things visible, we're going to change the layer blending mode. That's over here on the right-hand side of the image. And what these do is change the way that the colors on one layer interact with the layer below. So in this case, we'll choose Overlay. And now we can see how that overlay mode changes the way that this north image looks on top of the pier and the sunset sky layers. Now that we have this layer blended a little better, we're going to make it smaller to fit onto the pier. So to make this smaller to fit on the pier, I'll hold down the Shift key and drag it down to keep the proportions the same. If I don't hold the Shift key, the proportions don't stay in concert. So I'll drag this over here. I'll make it a little smaller yet. Okay. Now in order to apply this transformation, I can just hit the Enter key or click the checkbox up here. To make this north symbol fit and look natural on that pier, first make sure your north layer is selected. And then we'll come up here to Edit, Transform, Distort. I think we could also use Perspective here, but in this case, we'll use Distort. Now, I can grab one of these corners and sort of match it to the corner of the pier, right there. And maybe I can take this up here a little bit, and this one over here. Yes, that looks pretty good. And I've hit the Enter key to commit that change. Now, in order to hide the edges of this north layer, I'm going to use another layer mask to hide the edges of that N symbol. So I'll click on the layer down here at the bottom right and click another Add Mask button. I'll make sure that my foreground color is black. I'll choose B for my brush tool, add a layer mask to the north layer, make sure that black is my foreground color, and make sure that I have a soft, round brush. Soft, round. Hardness 0, size 65, and let's come over here and see what we've got. 65 isn't quite big enough to hide these edges, so I'll choose the right square bracket key on my keyboard, up near the top right of your keyboard. That's pretty big, so I'll go ahead and use that. And what I'm doing here is working around this N to use my mask to mask it out. And if I hit that pipe key again, you can see where I've done my work. Because this brush is so big, I'm actually going to make it a little smaller here and change my foreground color to white to bring this in and the arrow back out a little more. Now we can't see the edges. Now we'll add the central element, the door columns and cornice to this image. Again, I'll use File, Place Embedded, and choose Door. Now I can use my Move tool to drag this around. I need to dial down the opacity a little bit so I can see what's happening there. And now I can resize, transform, and place this door where I want it. See how it's a little bit big now. So let's hold down our Shift key and make it a little smaller. Not quite. Shift key, proportional size change. All right, I'll go with that. Now I'll click the check mark to set that transformation. I'll change the opacity on the door back to 100%. And I want to get rid of all these brick parts. In order to do that, I'll choose Command plus a couple of times to zoom in. I'll hold my space bar to click and drag so I can move my image around. And I'll use the quick selection tool here under the object selection tool on the left, quick selection. And we see how it has a plus in the middle of the brush. That means I'll be adding to the selection as I go. So my object selection tool didn't do what I wanted it to, either the adding or subtracting mode. Now what I'll try is the magic wand tool. The magic wand tool selects color areas that are similar to the one area pixel that you click on. And the tolerance, or how many colors it selects, is related to this tolerance here. So this is the range, the sample range for this color, 32. What I'll do now is try to use the magic wand tool to select these bricks. And we can kind of see where that 32 tolerance leaves us. In order to add more, I'll choose shift. You see a little plus underneath the magic wand now, and I'll just kind of start clicking around. Maybe I need to up the tolerance a little bit. Let's try 64 so we can grab more each time. Wow, it just selected most everything. I'll change this back to 32, and I'll hold the option key down to start subtracting everything in these columns. Well, here we want to keep the door and some things like that. So I'll just go through and keep taking these things out and subtracting these things from. Sometimes you forget which is which. Now I'll choose the lasso tool, and I want to subtract this inner door stuff for now from the bricks, right? We're just getting rid of the bricks, and really just the external bricks, not the little pedestals that the columns are on. Make sure you know what you're doing. Option for subtract from the selection, or shift to add to the selection. Here are some of these little spots up here. I'll click shift to get those. Now I can see that I mostly have the outer stuff selected. And now what I'll do in order to make this selection a little better is choose select and smooth. Let's see what 4 does. You see these little dots up here, some places that are still selected. Now they're gone. That's looking pretty good, except for here. So I'll choose the option key with my lasso to circle those. Okay, now I have all the red brick wall selected. I'm still on the door layer, and I'll choose the layer mask here, which will automatically fill the selected area with black and hide it. Oops. So what I done there is I actually had the columns and door selected. No problem. That's what a mask is for. We see over here that I've hidden everything except for the brick layer. Let's turn on the pipe key and see the quick mask. You see where all the red parts are? Those are the parts that are hidden. All I really need to do here is invert my mask, which I will do. Command I, there we go. And because this is a mask, we can actually see where we might have missed some parts. Like here, right? Or, really anywhere. We can mask out any of this that we want. For now, let's go back to seeing the whole thing and do our next step. Now we're going to mask out the door and the archway over it. In order to do that, we'll use a different selection tool, which is the rectangular marquee. I'll command +++ to move in a little bit and use my rectangular marquee tool to select the door, a little bit around it. Here now I can drag it up a bit to where this arch starts to curve. And now I want to select that curve arch as well. So I'll come back over to my rectangular marquee tool and choose the elliptical marquee tool. If I hold down the shift key, we can see first that it adds the plus to it. And second, right, if I hold down the shift key and the space bar, we can move this selection around a little bit until we get it perfectly matched up. But I still haven't made it big enough. So I let go of the space bar. I'm still holding down shift, and I'm just trying to add in, make this just a little bigger. Whoops. I let go of my mouse key. So let's step back. In order to do this a little more easily for me, I'm going to choose Command R to get my rulers out. And then I'll drag a guide here, and I'll drag a guide here to the top of the arch. Now I should be able to start right at the edge and kind of get what I want. So again, I'll hold down the shift key with my elliptical marquee tool and just drag it out. There. That was a lot easier. It looks like it shrank a tick when I let go of it. Regardless, I'll come here and I'll choose expand selection. Let's say 10 pixels and see what we get. Oops. The reason it did that is because I actually have both selections selected now. So let's see if we can try it one more time. I hold down my shift key to get the plus, right? I'm not making a new selection. I'm adding to a selection. Okay, that's not the best selection, but it's pretty good and we're going to go for it. Now that I have the door selected, I'm going to fill it with black, the foreground color in the mask, in order to hide that door in the arch. So again, my foreground color is black, and I can choose edit, fill. That's more work than I want it to be. So what I'm actually going to do, come right back here. I've used my history tool to come back to where I just finished my elliptical marquee here, right? Let's smooth it one more time. That line looks a little better now. Now, when I choose edit and fill, what I'm doing here is I haven't been satisfied with the way that the selection has been working. And so what I've redone it to start with the circle at top. Good enough. Okay, now edit, fill, black, normal, 100%. I have my door mask selected. Hey, yeah. So sometimes you just don't know. You just don't know what's going on. And there we are. It's not quite perfect right here. So let me zoom in one more time and see if I can make this edge a little nicer. I still have my rectangular marquee selected. I'll choose shift. I'll press down on shift and drag down here to just get it a little bit wider. I think that'll do. Now I'll come in here and press the B to get my brush back. I still have black as the foreground color. I have my door mask selected here. I can just run down the edge. It's a hard edge because I have that selection and the paintbrush can't go outside of it. Right there. Command D to deselect, Command 0 to get it all on screen. There we are. Press Command and semicolon to get rid of my guides. And there we have it. Now what we want to do is hide the bottom half of the door. We'll just keep this top arch and the columns here, okay? First, I feel like I want to move it up though. There. Again, I'll choose my brush tool and I'll get a big and soft, 50% soft brush, 50 pixels. That's not big enough. I'll click off of the brush menu to hide it, and I will hit my right square bracket to make this much bigger. What I want to do is just go straight across here. So I can hold down the shift key with my brush just over the horizon. And I'm not erasing the bottom half of the door. I am masking it. So I'm still on the mask layer over here on the door. And what I will do is just with the shift key pressed, I will swipe across. There we go, hidden. Press the pipe key again to see what I did. There's your mask. All of those parts of the door and columns are hidden now. If I want to see what everything looks like and just turn off that mask for a minute, I can press the control key and click on the mask and choose disable layer mask. Now I can see that whole door layer again. And there's a big red X here on the disabled mask. I control click on it again and choose enable layer mask. So now we have a floating door above our pier and our sky and our north pointing arrow. We now have 4 different images in this composite, which are reflected then in these 4 different layers. Now that we have the fantastical elements of this image started, let's put some more in and take it further away from reality. Here again, I'll choose File, Place Embedded, and choose Clouds for Pier. I'm going to hide the history panel now by clicking those arrows and change the Clouds for Pier layer to 50% opacity so that I can see what I'm doing. I choose my Move tool and I drag these clouds down until this kind of central part here, the middle of the box, in the doorway. You can see my smart guides turning on and telling me that this image is perfectly centered. Now I want to hide the clouds that I don't want to use. And so in order to make this into a layer mask, I can come here and choose, I think it's option. Yes. By holding down the option key, when I click on the layer mask down here in the layers panel, it fills that mask with black. It hides everything on the layer. Now, what I'll do is choose a brush and make white the foreground color so that I can bring back some of those clouds by unmasking them. Choose control here to get my brush menu, 50% hardness. Let's lower that a little bit. Size is fine. Okay, I hit enter to hide that. And now I can just kind of paint this white on here to bring back some of these clouds. Oops. And as you've seen, I've been going back and forth with all of the masking so far. So here I'll hit X to make black the foreground color, and I'll kind of come in and just take that back, take the edge of my pier back. I hit X again, kind of go on through the top of this. And I'm not worried about touching the pier now. I can go back and fix that in a minute. There we go. I hit X again, and I clean up my pier edge. Got those. I need to put the opacity back to 100%. Now, I'll change my brush hardness again down to a little lower, 20%. Now, I'll switch back to black because I want to hide the edges of these clouds a little bit in here. You know, and you can do the masking as much as you like to get the effect you want, right? And so I just do kind of this and just go around the edges. I have a very soft brush, so it fades a lot between and looks like a more natural blend here. Now we'll add the boat, file, place embedded again. This way we get all smart objects and we can always change them as needed. I chose file, place embedded, and sailboat. You can see my smart guide come up telling me I'm right in the center of the image. See that pink line? I'll hit enter to place the boat there. Now, in order to blend this one, I'm going to do something a little different. Rather than choose a layer mask, we're going to use the blend if option. In order to see the layer options, I'll just click out here in the empty gray area, and down at the bottom of this window, I see blend if. And this is a way to eliminate color values from an image. In this case, it's gray, and then we have red, green, blue. I want to get rid of some of this gray around the sailboat. I can take the white slider and drag it down a ways, and you see how the gray is being eliminated. If I go too far, I start to lose the sailboat. But if I come up here, that should be fine. Take it down just a little more. That's a pretty hard break though, right? So I want to hold down the option key and split this white slider, take that transition up a little bit, soften the transition, but what I've done now is brought back some of that gray sky. So let's go ahead and start moving this back down until we find what we want. Great. Click OK. Now we still have these edges. For these, I'll use a mask. Put a mask on. I'll choose B for my brush tool. As we can see over here, I have black for my foreground color, and I'll just paint around the edges here and get rid of these edges of the sailboat image. Sailboat's added, and we've used blend if to remove the background. Now we want to make the depth more obvious, as if we're looking into it and not just sort of at a flat surface. We want to be able to look at this image as if we're looking sort of through a window more than at a wall. So we want to create the illusion of depth. In order to do that, I'll add some more clouds. I'll choose File, Place Embedded, and then Clouds for Sky. You can see that the Clouds for Sky layer was added beneath the sailboat. If I had the sailboat layer selected, it would come in above it. But we can click on that and drag it down here. The stacking order of your layers is the order in which they appear. So whatever is on your top of your layer stack is going to appear in front of that image. Now with this Clouds for Sky layer selected, I'll choose V for my move tool, and I'll move this up just a little ways. Let's reduce the opacity so we can see what we're doing here. Drag this up a little bit, Command minus so we can fit it all on the screen. Okay, that looks great. I'll change the opacity back to 100%. And now, again, I'm going to use that blend if option in order to remove the blue sky from these clouds and just keep the clouds. This is a great way outside of object selections and your various selection tools to blend layers better. I'll choose the current layer, but in this one, we don't want to remove the lighter colors. We want to remove the darker blues. I'll click the black slider here and drag it in a ways, and you can see the blue going away. That's pretty good. And then again, we want it to blend better. So I'll hold down the Option key, and I think it's the right-hand side. Yep, there we go. See, we've removed most of the blue from the sky. If I keep going, it removes more. So I'm holding down the Option key and moving the right half of the black slider. Something like this. That should do the trick. And I'll click OK. Now I'll click off of that transformation to set it, and I can still see the edge of this cloud layer here. And so what I'll do is click on that clouds for sky layer, create a new layer mask, make myself a brush that's very soft, control click, hardness 18, 15% is all good. And I will make sure that my foreground color is black. I can click these two, or I can click the X key to swap those colors. I'll make my brush a little bigger and just swipe right through here to mask the whole bottom of that layer. Now that we have these clouds in here, what I want to do is be able to still see the arch and the doorway and all. So what I'll do is Command plus 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 so I can see what I'm doing. And here are my columns. What I will do now is left bracket to make my brush slightly smaller. I'm still on the mask of my clouds for sky layer, and I still have black, meaning I want to hide parts of this layer, which I will do by coming over here to the column and just swiping down it to give it the sense of depth, right? That the clouds are both in front of and behind this doorway. Oops, I made a mistake, so I can choose Command Z to undo it. Or if I don't want to undo the whole thing, I can just change the mask by clicking the X key and repainting. So I've made my brush a little bigger. I'll come in here and kind of take out some of these clouds. Brush a little smaller. Here we go down this column. Command 0 to fit it all on the screen again. It's looking pretty good. And now I want to expose the top of the arch here. So I'm going to make my brush even bigger, and I'm going to change the opacity of my brush to 50%, and I'll make my brush even bigger. Then I'll come over here and kind of just soften some of these clouds. And so now we can see through these clouds to the gate behind. Now we'll add another layer, a little wildlife and depth with them. Place embedded. I will choose birds. So we've embedded this bird's image here into our composition. It's much too big and all the birds are on white. An easy way to eliminate white from your selections is by choosing the layer blending modes. So this darken group of layer blending modes will eliminate lighter colors. And then this lighten group of blending modes will eliminate darker colors. In this case, we're going to choose multiply to eliminate the white from this bird's image, and it works great. So when you have these complicated selections to make, don't feel like you have to draw around them with the lasso tool every time or use the magnetic lasso or another selection tool. You can use blending modes to make these complex selections. I'll choose Command minus to make it a little smaller, and I want the birds to be smaller so that they can follow the boat. And I can choose return to set my transformation. Okay, we're practically done now. We have all of the actual elements in. Now we're going to adjust the colors to make it a little more vivid and fantastical. In order to do that, we'll come down to click on the clouds for sky layer, then come over to your toolbar and click on your eyedropper. Pick one of these gold colors from the right side, and you'll see that your foreground color has changed. Now, with the clouds for sky layer still selected, click on Add Adjustment Layer. And here we want to add a solid color. And we've done that. It has added an adjustment layer called Color Fill 1 with the foreground color that we just set. Here in this color picker, I want you to notice here on the y-axis or the up-down axis of the color picture is your brightness from black to white. Then if you go on the x-axis or left to right is your saturation. So the further right we move, the more saturated this color gets. I'll click OK here. Now that I've set this color though, we can see that it affects every layer below it. In this case, we want to create a clipping mask. So I come over to this color fill layer with my cursor and I hold down the Option key. And as I move my cursor to this line, we see this icon come up. I click on it, and now I've made that color fill layer into what's called a clipping mask. And what that means is that it affects only the layer immediately underneath it. So we can see that solid fill color layer only working on the clouds for sky layer. Still too much, so let's go ahead and lower the opacity. About 50%. That looks pretty good. But now that I've done that, right, I've turned all of these clouds kind of golden. I've lowered the opacity down to 50%. I can see that I kind of have some of these clouds here in a place where I don't want them. So I'll go ahead and just use my brush again to mask out those items. I have to click on the mask. I have black as my foreground, and I'm going to come over here right to the horizon and just sweep it across. Not all of it disappeared. The reason that happened is because I still have my opacity for my brush at 50%. I've bumped up my opacity to 100% here, and now I can get rid of those orange clouds that were here interfering with my boat. I can see too that these clouds kind of popping up over the horizon. So I'm going to go ahead and eliminate some of those too. So I've had to just come back a little bit and kind of fix up my horizon clouds here to make sure that it all fits together. Right? I come through and oops, too much. Instead of deleting all of that because I like the first part of what I did, I'll hit X and just mask that part out again. Looking much better. Let me go ahead and save this before I forget. I really should have saved this a while back, but here we go. Late is better than never. Now we're nearly there, but we want to add a little more saturation to this image. The colors are still a little faded looking. To do that, I'll come back over here in the layers panel to the top of the image. I've still got my gold color in the foreground color area. Now I'll click on the background color swatch. That brings up our color picker again. And when you're in the color picker, you can sample from your image. So I'll pick like a purpley color up here. That's pretty good. And again, we want this color to be more saturated. And over here on the left side is the desaturated colors. So let's take it this way. Very blue. Okay. And now let's do the same for our foreground color. Make it a little more saturated by clicking to the right in the color picker. So now I have the orange sunset color and the blue sunset color here in my foreground and background color swatches. Now I'll add another adjustment layer to create a gradient over the image to make it appear more color synchronized. So I click on the layer adjustment panel window and choose gradient. Up here in the gradient options, I'll select this first one under basics, which is the foreground to the background that I just chose. Click off of that. And now what we want to do, we want it to go from purple on the left to orange on the right. And I will change the angle to get it the way that I want it. I think I actually want 90 degrees, don't I? I was clicking and dragging on that angle slider there, but you can see the numbers are highlighted, so I'll just choose 180. And there we are. I have the gradient of orange to blue reversed to show blue to orange. I'll click OK. And now we have this gradient fill hiding our entire image. And now in order to blend this color change and add it into our composition, I'm going to have to use another blending mode in order to change how this gradient fill layer interacts with the layers below it. I come over to the layer blending modes dropdown, and in this case, I will choose soft light. You can always preview your adjustment modes for layers by just slowly scrolling through, right? See how overlay is a little more vivid? Too vivid. Soft light. We talked about the darken and the lighten blending mode groups. Here, the overlay and soft light, these are what's called the high frequency layer adjustments. And what they do is kind of affect the lines in an image. So in this case, we'll choose soft light, and that looks lovely. You can see how that blending mode, purple to orange, has come through and affected the entire image below it. We might think that this side is a little too yellow or orange for our taste. In that case, we can choose the brush tool again, click on that mask, make the brush tool much bigger, change the opacity of our brush to 50%, and black is our foreground color. Make this brush even bigger. Opacity 50%, black foreground color, layer mask of the top gradient fill layer. And here I'll just kind of do this a little bit to dial back that orangey yellow saturation. You can see here in the layer mask menu this sort of grayish color. And when I click on the quick mask key, the pipe key on the right side, you can see where that mask is actually being applied. So that's our tutorial demo for the Combine Images in Creative Way tutorial from Adobe. If you have any questions, as always, ask Parker at atlantatech.edu. Try it out, be creative, use blending modes, masks, and adjustment layers to add new and different amazing things to your various compositions. Thank you for your attention. See you soon.